and select it.
Yeah, fair enough.
And we're live for Canto XII of Dante's Inferno. Now as we're getting into this, we're getting into an interesting circle. The seventh circle of hell is one of my favorites because of where it interconnects with Greek mythology very overtly. This is also, at least in my experience going through the commentaries, probably one of the most prolifically talked about cantos by Western commentators. European commentators, not so much. But American and Central American commentators everywhere. So I have the sneaky suspicion we're seeing a minor juxtaposition of where Dante was actually the window that these cultures experienced their first touches of Greek mythology through. And therefore had a greater cultural influence within these particular areas, hence why in the social milieu they tend to be commented on more. Is there anything anybody wants to bring up from Canto 11?
Not that I can think of.
Rich?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Well, you were blinking green, so I thought you were clicking stuff, getting ready to start talking. So I want to make sure. Okay, so as we got through the last canto, we got to deal with a pope in hell for probably the most obvious reasons. We will eventually get to more as we go through. This is a commentary that I think that he is using on multiple levels. The popes, because anybody is able to. Hold on a second. The fuck. I just got an alert on Studio. 1 second. What the hell is it doing? It's fine. Stupid thing.
Your frame rate dropped from 30 frames per second to 29. It thought it would tell you.
Well, it's like, oh, you can change the bitrate from 51,000 blank to 52,000 blank. Shut up! Stupid fucking alert. That is the dumbest fucking alert I've ever fucking gotten from this fucking program. Like, oh, you can up your bitrate. Why? Why? Okay, so, he was using this as social commentary on multiple levels because he's putting the highest and the lowest within multiple points of intersection, where he will put particular names that historically in the 14th century were considered very low bearing. They were not, any kind of high regard to people who at least 40% of the population would have considered above reproach in the same exact circle, sometimes within eyesight of each other. He does this on multiple occasions, and I think that this is something that there is a deeper implication beyond just the social commentary. He's trying to bring in the concept of everyone's equal in death. Nobody, there is no nobility in death. There is no peasantry in death. Once you're dead, and then it's up to God. Is essentially what he's trying to get to, because he was still a believer, despite all of his humanism. Okay. Ooh, everybody's starting off slow today.
Despite or in spite of all of it.
True. What was that, Rich? Oh, okay. I just heard something before he muted, I guess. Okay, so I will start us off this week.
Wait, sorry, was I muted?
Yeah, you muted
Yeah.
yourself right after you made a noise.
My
So
symbols like it are backwards. When I touch it, if it says, oh, okay, it's delaying. The little slash over the microphone like doesn't change for like a few seconds after I click it for some reason.
it's Discord. Basically, if it's still receiving any information from your mic, it won't register as fully muted yet.
So okay, yeah. So I would say humanism is sort of a separate metric for the theism slash atheism. I think you can be a Christian humanist or an atheist humanist. I mean, I think your anthropology is different is not dependent on your theology.
No,
Right.
no, it's not. I just point
You,
out that
so
this
like, I don't
is
think being a humanist is ever like is necessarily in spite of or despite one's
well.
belief in God or lack
This is
thereof.
but this particular point of the everybody equal in death, that is something
Yeah.
that was not common within the 14th century. So he was pressing the norm for his time period in doing this, whereas
I
today
think
it's rather norm.
yeah, I think it's more of a historical thing that if you were heavily theistic, you did not, at least in the Western Christian tradition, tend to be humanistic.
Especially not about like the fate of the dead.
Yeah,
You may have been so of the fate of the living, but not of the dead.
yeah. Prior to, I would say the Renaissance slash the Enlightenment, humanism and Christianity were often very much at odds.
I mean, there were Christian humanists dating all the way back to the 9th century. Let's be fair to the history of it.
Okay.
But secular humanism and religious humanism very much hit at odds on a regular basis because of the different modalities at which they approach things, which is obviously to be expected in these time periods. So, as much as I will absolutely fault these institutions for continuing this shit today, I'm not going to fault them so much in the 14th century where saying certain things got you killed. Like, just saying.
I mean, there's famously a debate between Erasmus and Martin Luther over humanism.
Hmm?
Erasmus being the humanist, and so it was really just about the anthropology of the human soul, and whether or not are we snow-covered dung or are we are we actually creatures like made in the image of God that are deserving of love? Um, that became so that's the humanist, the Christian humanist perspective.
Well, I mean, I normally try to avoid this, but this one at least is a quick tangent. I will point out to any Christian who is watching this, I don't care if you're offended, if you believe you are above animals in any way, shape, or form, I will point you to Ecclesiastes 3:18. You're welcome for your scriptural reading for the week.
Well, listen, my name saint is Saint Francis, and he preached to the animals. So I think he was a humanist as well, but he was also a creatureist, right? If you
Um,
had a
a- a-
brain,
Actually, what I've been hearing from a lot of people recently, because it's a growing trend to call yourself a sentientist, is that Saint Francis was the birth of sentientism.
okay. I don't know if it was the birth of it, but he
I don't.
certainly,
It's just what I've been
yeah,
hearing. I haven't fact checked it, but yeah. And I could even believe it because I've read a lot of Francis's writings. Like,
right,
he's brilliant for his time period.
yeah.
Um. Uh, Now that being said, we'll get into the reading since we're on a slightly restricted. Oh wait, are we still on restricted time, or did that get shifted to Rich?
Yeah, it's normal. Like I'll be leaving. I think we've got about 2 hours for me.
Okay.
Well, less than that because I got to drive. But I'll try to
Well,
listen in the car.
well, no, it's about 10 minutes to our normal start time before we did the hour back. So like we'll still have 2 hours instead of the three we're gonna
That's
get.
fine. Yeah.
Okay. The place where to descend the bank we came was alpine, and from what was there, moreover, of such a kind that every eye would shun it. such as that ruinous which in the flank smote, on the side of the tent, or on the side of the Trent, the adage, either by earthquake or by failing stay. From the my fucking tongue this morning. For from the mountain's top, from which it moved, onto the plain, the cliff is shattered. So, some path toward give to him who was above. Even such was descent of that ravine, and on the border of the broken chasm, the infamy of Crete was stretched along. Now, I will stop here mainly because Longfellow puts a particular point to bring up the infamy of Crete. This is bringing in a particular point in history that was a well-known, like, historical, like, rhetoric to use, so much so that there were multiple ways that you could intonate this particular event and bring it to just about anyone's mind, high and low of education, because it was so well known, the fall of Crete. So like this is a significant point that Dante's bringing it up in the seventh circle, which this is as is in the description, it points out this is for the circle for those who commit violence upon others. This is the fall of Crete, the infamy of Crete. It is directly linked to their oppressive tactics within battle, and the actual ways that they would penalize like populaces after battles, etc. So this is the significance of that Longfellow is trying to point out, because by the time Longfellow is writing his commentary, this is no longer a social, like, historical norm that people know.
It's interesting because what you point out as being the military tactics of Crete, in Hollander's commentary, he believes that the infamy of Crete refers to the Minotaur and the
That's the double meaning.
Oh, okay, yeah, and the
Yeah, because
immorality because of Pasiphae's, basically the origin of the bull of.
Yeah, I didn't want to bring up the bull yet because we hadn't got to the Minotaur. But yes, this is the other part of Crete. Most people forget that the labyrinth of the Minotaur is under Crete.
Yes.
Like, this is also a point of history. We just hadn't got to that yet. But yes, you're 100% correct. I'm pointing to the infamy of Crete. Like, Longfellow is bringing it also to the Minotaur. I will bring it to the infamy of Crete when you look at the church records from the 14th century. No, they're talking about the military tactics. They're not talking about the fucking Minotaur. Just saying.
Yep.
I mean, and let's be honest, Rich, in the 13th and 14th century, could you imagine the Catholic Church writing about any of the Greek myths as if they were real? Like, even remotely?
I mean, yeah, but it's always understood to be a poetic reference. It's just that, the literal level sometimes can dominate in the storyline, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. But that's what I mean. They're
actually thought that the Greek gods were,
So they're going to give it less importance, so it makes sense that the church is focusing on the tactics of the government at the time. So that's fine.
Yeah.
Makes sense. And why I end up seeing some of this stuff through different lenses, because I end up looking at all... Oop, 1 second. I just got a weather alert. No, it's not for me. Okay. Ugh. Flash flood warning for the county south of me. Ugh. So, but I look into this more interdisciplinary approach, because I try to look at all of the records. Why did Crete maintain its infamy despite the fact that the myths were lost to most of the Western world for 3 centuries? So on and so forth. And a lot of it became because the church would teach about the other failings of these Greek societies from the pulpit, because it was a way to try and show the exceptionalism of their home country, be it Italy, or Greece, or blah 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 blah. Go down the list. They're trying to sit there and show, like, see how much we've improved. These people used to believe in the creatures with the head of a bull and blah 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 blah. Like it actually, that starts, we can trace back to about the 7th century, and oh god, what was it? Pope oh god damn it, I can't think of his name right now. But we could actually trace it back to where we started to section off Catholicism's understanding of mythology from the rest of mythology, to where everything else was less than, even to the lowest people. Like, that was what it was being taught, even by, like, friars, etc. And everybody's quiet this morning. Am I the only one who fucking slept at all? Well,
No,
Despy, you're in the wrong time period.
Well,
I've got a decent amount
time
of sleep.
period. Okay, I didn't know. Am I in the Edo time period or the Sakoku time period?
Let's see. For you right now, isn't it technically fucking Sunday?
Oh, you said
or
different time periods. I was wondering, like, if I was
Yeah, different day for you. Technically, or 3 minutes too, I should say.
yeah.
Um.
It's almost 10 o'clock my time.
Oh. Okay. Shit. Oh, okay, I was 1 hour ahead. Sorry. Okay. So, yeah, you're so far ahead. You're in the future. Just get the fuck out of here. Like, as long as you're still there, and
14 hours.
At least we know the sun's gonna go down and possibly come back up tomorrow.
I'm just letting you know that 14 hours ahead of time, it still sucks. So, not much.
That's the fucking truth. Yeah, that's a running joke in a lot of the communities I'm in. Whenever somebody from Australia comes in, or Japan, we're like, "Yeah, but message from the future. So we're still alive. Good." It doesn't matter what you say when you come in. If we know that's where you're from, that's what gets said about you. Mm-hmm. Hey, thanks. Well, we get to know we live another 12 hours or 17 hours, whatever it ends up being. Okay, so, and you're right. Hollander does bring it to the Minotaur right away. So does Sayers. So does Chiardi. I believe that. No, you're right to do so.
Looking at Longfellow's commentary, he also brings it to the Minotaur right away.
He does. But the reason I bring it up is because Longfellow is trying to bring it to a point that they do not know this particular point of the history. When you look at the church records of the same time period, the church records are talking about the particular military tactics and actions of the government, because that is what they are teaching from the pulpit as being inferior to European cultures.
Fair enough.
Wait. What's inferior?
The basically the ancient polytheistic mythologies as they are teaching it, and specifically Crete.
That's also European culture, right?
But they don't remember. We're not teaching logic here. We're teaching culture and propaganda. Like, they're trying to teach it as this was inferior. These are the savage beliefs of people who didn't know any better.
Yeah, sure, fair enough.
Like, and when I say that European culture, because this is one that is centralizing as a culture around Catholicism, specifically because of the spread of Catholicism over at this particular point, 700 years, it has spread through most of Europe and much of North Africa. A more homogenized group of people in Europe than had existed since the Roman Empire 400 years previously.
So the definition of what is European had changed.
Yeah, from Okay, no, we all did that. Yeah, we all did. I had a hiccup too.
Oh,
okay.
That was let me make sure. Let me check stream real quick. Make sure it didn't fuck with the stream, because Discord just
the gods being offended at our characterization of them.
Well, they can kiss my ass and try again. They failed. I have a backup server. Wait, it's not showing us live. What the hell? No. Okay. Hold on a second. Stop streaming. Because I'm looking. Okay, it's showing us live now. Okay. Okay. Stupid ass OBS. So, I'm just going to reread that section again because I don't even know if it went out because of it. When I go there, it didn't show us live when I first clicked over. So, who knows how long that glitch had been going on. So, I'll read it faster at this point. Hopefully, the rest of the commentary went out. I'm not going to go back and re-say all that. The place where to descend the bank we came was Alpine, and from what was there, moreover, of such a kind that every eye would shun it. Such as that ruinous which in the flank smote, on this side of Trent the Adige, either by earthquake or by failing stay. For from the mountain's top, from which it moved, onto the plain the cliff is shattered so. Some path 'twould give it to him who was above. Even such was the descent of that ravine, and onto the border of the broken chasm, the infamy of Crete was stretched along. Okay, so just to get through that quick, to make sure that it's straightened out. We will get into this, like the infamy of Crete. The reason that as it's translated to English is pointed to such like specificity is because much of the Greek myths are lost to time, and the rest of the commentary. Hopefully, it went out. If it didn't, sorry guys. But we're on a limited time thing, so I can't go back off on every tangent. So, and I'm gonna have to figure out why OBS is acting a fool later again. So, who would like to pick up from line 13? And it looks like we should go to line 27.
Take that.
Okay.
Who was conceived in the fictitious cow, and when he us beheld, he bit himself, even as one whom anger racks within. My sage toward him shouted, peradventure thou think'st that here may be the Duke of Athens, who in the world above brought death to thee. Get thee gone, beast, for this one cometh not, instructed by thy sister, but he comes in order to behold your punishment. As is that bull who breaks loose at the moment in which he has received the mortal blow, who cannot walk but staggers here and there. The Minotaur beheld I do the like, and he the wary cried, run to the passage, while he wroth, 'tis well thou shouldst descend.
Okay. So, again, now we're pointing to the Duke of Athens, which we can get into the commentary on, but at least in my opinion, this commentary is only necessary in the 18th century because the whole point to his inclusion within the story is not necessarily important to his historical significance, it's story significance. And it's explained within said story within the following tersets that we got to. Like it's given almost immediately that he is instructed by his sister. He's ordered to behold the punishments, etc. Like these things are direct inclinations to the character of the person. It's an easy thing to contextually gather the point to his inclusion within the story, and the historical significance is far less important. Because even in the 14th century, the Duke of Athens was unknown. It would have been a name that nobody knew without further explanation outside of the most educated.
I just want to clarify here because it's talking about the one who slayed the Minotaur,
Hmm.
who was in the
And they will not know
mythology
his name.
of Theseus. Okay, they didn't know the name
Yeah,
Theseus.
yeah, they would not have known. They would have been like the
Okay.
Duke of Athens, because the story, it's a story to them. It's not history. It's not something to be studied, unless you're a highly educated person. This is a story that at best is told by like vagabonds and jongleurs as they go through your city. It would have been referred to as the Duke of Athens. That would have been all that was necessary. And they would have known the story from the plays that are told on the streets and in the forums and whatnot.
But of
Because
course, we all know that it was actually Percy Jackson who slew the Minotaur.
well, the second time,
Yeah,
which
Yeah,
by the way,
because,
my students
as we
will
all
correct
know-
me on that.
as we all know, Rick Riordan is just the descendant of the Oracle at Delphi.
In fact, I discovered today, or not really discovered. It's like wasn't the first time this happened. I can't make a Star Trek reference and expect everyone to understand it, but I can make a Percy Jackson reference and everyone will understand it. So that's where we are as a
if
world now.
if you really want to fuck with them, throw a Magnus Chase reference in there, because that's the one that Riordan did about the Norse gods, and it's Annabeth Chase's cousin from the Percy Jackson story.
Okay.
Yeah, if you bring that up and they recognize it, you will get cool points, guaranteed.
That series has been helpful because I do a lot of Greek mythology in my teaching, and to the extent that they like catch the references, it's because of Percy Jackson. So I can't complain about it.
Yeah, and before the Percy Jackson book franchise got as big as it did, it was the Clash of the Titan movies with Sam Worthington, because they did those remakes, and it was like
my go-to used to be Harry Potter. I could make a Harry Potter reference and everyone would understand. But now we're getting to the point where that's not true anymore. So yeah,
or they do know it and they're just not going to say they know it because of the controversy around it, which is also
oh no,
stupid.
these kids don't know the controversy. They're sheltered.
Fair enough. I forget, because like the kids, they will bring up like in the Discord, they'll bring up stuff, and I'm like, you say they're sheltered, but then they bring up stuff that I would not expect sheltered kids to know about. So it's a different type of shelter that I'm used to.
Yeah, I mean, sure, yeah. They're very well educated. It's just that their education like doesn't include, anything having to do with like trans issues and stuff.
So here's something interesting. Chaucer was writing less than a century after Dante, and he specifically names Theseus as the Duke of Athens.
Yeah, okay, what the hell is going on? So my stream just gave me that damn alert again.
Hey, you can increase your bit rate.
Well, yeah, but when I then went and checked the channel, we're not live yet. It's saying stream status excellent. What in the hell is going on?
Maybe it's because you were checking your channel. Let me check your channel real quick
Maybe.
to see if it, because sometimes that can be an issue.
Oh, let me go to the manage videos, because then if it's there. Yeah, okay, it's showing me live in the manage videos. It's giving me this alert, and because it's giving me this alert, it's not showing me any drop frames. It's showing me 0% drop frames, any of that. But in the little control panel, all of that is now like locked up. It's not showing a little green broadcast bubble or anything like that. So
This is weird. It's not showing you live for me.
hold on a second. Let me manage. It's public. Oh, hold on. That's why. For some reason, it changed it when this bitrate thing came up. It kicked it to unlisted.
It's a good thing I checked then.
Well, I mean, the video would have still been up, and it would have been in the playlist. Yeah. Eh. Of course, Discord wants to be a pain in the ass, too. There. I mean, so what's been going on is we're broadcasting, but because it was set to unlisted, it wasn't showing us live. Fucking stupid. Ugh. Okay. Oh well, no big deal. Now, that being said, you were saying Chaucer. Sorry, because the shit happened.
No, it's fine. So you were saying that Dante would not have known.
No, the
Theseus.
average. No, Dante would have.
Oh.
I said it is less story important because anybody outside of the most educated would not have known the name, but they would have known the story.
Okay. I misunderstood what you were saying. Yeah, because Chaucer, who was, I don't know exactly when this was written, but he himself lived in the around he was born around 50 years after this was written, so we're talking less than a century later.
But Chaucer was also extremely well read and educated
Yes.
through his travels. Like I said, anybody outside of the most well educated would have not known the name, and therefore the historical importance would have been far less value to them, because to them it's a story, it's a play on the street.
Okay.
And in this time period, if I go back to what we had talked about in previous episodes, we're talking about something like 10 to 15% of the population would have been what we consider educated for their time period. Like just that's all who would have had access to it. Either be a peasant class that becomes scribes or blah, 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 blah.
Fair enough.
Ugh. Rich, do you want to pick up at line 28?
Yeah, I can do that. Hold on.
What time did you stay up to, Rich? You sound like you're half dead this morning.
Well, I've just had a long day. We've got our first big debate tournament next week.
Ah,
So we've been doing a
gotcha.
lot of prep. The kids are, have all done last minute stuff, so now they're like scrambling to get their stuff together. Okay, 28. Thus down we took our way o'er that discharge of stones, which oftentimes did move themselves beneath my feet from the unwanted burden. Thoughtful I went, and he said, Thou art thinking perhaps upon this ruin, which is guarded by that brute anger which I just now quenched. Now will I have thee know, the other time I here descended to the nether hell, the precipice had not yet fallen down. But truly, I well discern, a little before his coming, who the mighty spoil bore off from Dis in the supernal circle. Upon all sides of the deep and loathsome valley trembled so that I thought the universe was thrilled with love, by which there are who think the world oft times converted into chaos. And at that moment, this primeval crag, both here and elsewhere, made such overthrow. But fix thine eyes below, for thou drawest near the river of blood, within which boiling is whoever by violence doth injure others.
Yeah. Okay, so now we are getting to the river of blood within the underworld. We are again touching back into the Greek mythology of the way these rivers are functioning, as opposed to the up to this point would have been traditionally considered a part of the hell of Christianity. This is visceral, because you're talking about in this time period They've been going through, what was it, Rich? 87 years of war between the various regions around Italy, Spain, and France, and like pretty much everybody alive at this point had not known more than 5 years without a battle.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So like rivers of blood and those who do assault to others, like this is gonna like almost smack anybody who's reading it in this time period like a wet fish. Like they're instantly gonna get like a cold trickle down their back as they think about this. Like I think that's significant, whereas in modern times we're kind of desensitized to this concept due to like modern literature and like entertainment mediums. This concept would not startle most people because we've shown like massive scale war to people who would have never seen it before in graphic detail. They would have never seen it before outside of these time periods when it was so common. Like that's the I believe in this time period this would have been the equivalent of like the dig a hole scene in Godfather. Like that oh shit, just got chills moment.
Right.
Anybody else have input on that? Because that's like how I interpret this from the 14th century, because they wouldn't have had the shit that desensitized us.
Well, I mean, what is it? When we're talking about the river of blood, outside of like Western cultures, including in East Asia, there's what's known as the Sanzanokawa, and that is the river of blood that people like bob up and down in inside of East Asia as well. And it's really interesting that this.
Does that would also relate to violence?
Well, most of the people that are there were violent criminals. So,
okay.
I mean,
interesting.
Like,
well, it could point to the psychology of humanity, that when you see such atrocities, the things you see in your dreams may have some secondary blanketing effect, like rivers or rain or things like that in the moment when your face is getting hit by the blood in the battle, that's what it felt like, that's what it reminds you of, and that's what the nightmares then come from and extrapolate out.
Like the whole thing behind it is like the Sanzanokawa is supposed to be the river that everybody, you're flowing through it. You can't get out of it. The current is basically pulling you, but you're also swimming in blood, which means that you're not going to be able to float in it, which means you're constantly sinking in it at the same time. And then there's also what they call the Hari no Yama, which is like the mountain of needles. And basically both of these are considered to be like two of the major forms of torture inside Buddhist hell. In which you're basically made to climb up a mountain made of needles or sink into a giant pond of blood.
You guys are kind of extra. Just saying. Nah, we can't have a motherfucker push a rock up a fucking hill for eternity. Nah, we gotta have you climb needles.
Right. Well, I mean, and we're not even talking about Chinese hell. Chinese hell has like 37 different hells, depending on what you did. We're like,
and some of them are here on Earth.
Right. There's the hell where you basically have your skin peeled from your body. There's the hell that you get boiled in oil for all eternity. There's there's the hell where basically you get put into an enclosed space and all the oxygen just gets sucked out of it, and you get to suffocate over and over and over again.
Yeah, and then there's the one where that you're cursed to walk the earth because you were so beloved in life that everybody will know fear when they see you and all that shit, and you have to know the torment of everybody fleeing in terror before you. I'm just like I said, Asian people are extra. Just saying. Like, in our hell, you just get fucking burned to death and ripped apart for eternity. You guys got to add all this extra shit.
Do you guys hear about the one where Donald Trump goes to hell?
Oh no. Okay, well, we just got demonetized. Go ahead.
He goes and the devil meets him. He says, "Well, we've had a lot of souls come to hell recently. We don't really have enough room right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a few different options, people who are already getting punished, and if you choose that one, then I'll let that person go free, and you can just take their place." And so the first place he goes is to a room where Barack Obama is jumping into a pool, like off of a platform, then getting up out of the pool, and then jumps in again over and over and over again, like for eternity. And Trump is like, "Man, that seems like a lot of work to me. I don't think I can do that one." So okay, we'll come over to this room. And uh, there's a room where George W. Bush is breaking rocks, one after another, just breaking rocks and breaking rocks. And a new rock appears every time he breaks one. He's just doing that for eternity. And Trump is like, "Oh man, I don't know. I threw my shoulder out, golf injury. Like, I don't know if I can do this one. That one seems like a lot of, not
The
sure."
bone spur moved from my feet to my shoulders.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, can't feel. He says, "Okay, I got one more room." Takes him, opens up the door. Bill Clinton is strapped to a bed, where Monica Lewinsky comes and does what she does, just over and over again, for eternity. And Donald Trump says, I think I could get used to this one. I think this is one I'd rather do this one. I'll live do this one. And the devil says, "Okay, great, Monica, you can go."
Ah, old joke. Old joke, new characters. I mean,
Yeah.
on the flip side, it's just like when we think about hell and the contrapassos therein, like almost everybody in Western thought thinks in hell and contrapasso, whether they realize it or not. Um, it's almost silly in reality because we come up with, even in our most horrid, like fucked up versions, we still come up with shit that people can deal with. Like, if this concept of hell is real, nah, all the punishments that we think of, nothing. They're paper cuts. In reality, the tortures that would be enacted upon the soul would be far worse than anything we can come up with. It's kind of the fucking point of the hell concept. It's one of the reasons why so many people have a hard time believing the concept until they're indoctrinated into it in the first place, because all these horrors beyond imagining. I can imagine some pretty fucked up shit. I'm sure there's people who can imagine some worse shit than I can imagine. This
Yeah,
is
but
a
the
this
idea
is a
is,
this is an entity that has all of time and space to think of that shit.
yeah, but this is supposed to be uh, God's justice, right? This is what we deserve, right? So yeah, you can think of worse punishments than what people are going through, but the idea is you don't deserve a worse punishment. That you deserve you deserve your contrapasso, right? You deserve. It's not even what you deserve, because to a degree, this isn't. Even though he will often say that this is the punishment from God, but ultimately, this is the punishment we give ourselves. And the Christian idea is actually that we're being rescued. The grace is supposed to rescue us from the predicaments that we get ourselves in. But it's referred to as the punishment of God, though. So I can't deny that like is in the language. But
Yeah,
that's always
yeah,
the
yeah,
way
yeah.
that I've looked
Paying
at it.
for original sin of
So
two
you don't make
creatures
it
that couldn't
worse
have
than
known
what
right
they
from
deserve.
wrong. You know,
Yeah, this is just like the hell that they've created for themselves. And this is why I think
this is my point
the
of bringing
show.
up. Even in modern thought, we all think in contrapasso, whether they realize it or not. It comes from this time period of putting it into through Dante and a couple other authors of hell is what we make it, as
This is why I
opposed
think that
to
show
good.
Lucifer gets it right.
Yeah, when you were talking about like the hell we bring upon ourselves,
Yeah.
my thought was immediately Lucifer,
Yes.
because in that it was literally the people keep themselves in hell.
They're
Yes, and
created. That's a contrapasso. Like that whole
Yeah.
show takes the concept of contrapasso like seriously and uses it. And I just think it does a great job of it. Like I think
no, it
theologically, there's a lot in it that's correct.
mm, well, we'll get into that another day because
Yeah.
that's a whole thing to take on that show. Because while I enjoyed the show, man, it did some fucking shit. But it did Uriel dirty. It did all kinds of fucking things dirty in that show. We'll just get into that another day. But
Yeah. Sure.
my point is like, no, this is God's wrath, and I think this is Dante realizing that, but not being able to fully accept it because he's a believer. Because the reality of the contrapasso, that's the harmonization we create in our mind for these things, for something we had no control over. The ancestors that committed the original sin had no ability to know good from evil in the first place, to know what they were doing was wrong. So therefore we are paying for a blameless sin that we did not commit. This is wrath, this is not justice. And this is Dante pointing that out through his believing humanism, but still humanism, because he's pointing out the injustice of this, and Virgil is the one pointing to the justice of it.
Oh, so what we're learning about now is how collective societies act?
Yeah. And now you know why you're on constant invite. No.
We are a collective society.
I mean, technically all
Well,
societies are to a
more
point.
collectivist.
Yeah, collectivist and collective are very different. But no,
Contrapasso is that you can never get coffee.
no, actually, your
Will be coffee
contrapasso.
just out of reach.
No. It's neither of these things. It's that you would be, no matter how hard you try, no matter how much work you put into it, you would never be able to get good coffee.
No, I know exactly what is
Coffee is a new love. His contrapasso is that no matter how much he teaches, all of his debate kids become Gibbs.
Oh, that's good.
I was about to say that his contrapasso would be that he'd have to go his entire eternity never being able to find water that gets above 200 degrees.
Oh yeah. I can't get to that CO2.
I mean, we both
No
went
matter how
extra
hard you
on.
boil it,
Yeah, no, we both went
no matter
extra
how
on our
hard you boil
level.
it'll never get rid of the tannins.
Yeah. I can't
Yeah.
get Gale's like.
I love the fact that
perfect
we're just
from
sitting
back to
here
back.
coming up with different hells for Rich.
Well, but
Yeah.
it's the contrapasso, in my opinion, because your first love was teaching. It's gonna be to do with all of your results will fail. Like that would be the contrapasso I would feel as a teacher personally, because like all of my kids become the worst version of what I tried to create. Yeah, that's my fucking nightmare.
Yeah, I knew a professor one time. He was a professor of rhetoric at the college I went to, which is a conservative Catholic university or whatever. And at the time, conservative meant that you were for the war. So everyone was like incredibly warmongering, despite the fact that we were a Catholic college. Everyone was kind of like caught up in this. And I remember him saying, "Why am I teaching them rhetoric? Like, why am I teaching them like how to be more persuasive out in the world, and so that they can make the world more like them?" And I was like, "Well, I'd like to think that my fears along that lines were dissuaded by the fact that all of my classmates from that time are like basically center left now, or center right at most."
Well, yeah, but you couldn't know that going in. So
Well,
his
right, but
fear
that was my
at the
argument.
time.
My argument is that yeah, but they'll become better people as a result of understanding these critical thinking skills and learning the things that you're telling them, And so
I personally agree with you, by the way. I was, but I'm saying in that
I
moment
was
he
proven right
couldn't
in
know
that
that.
little thing with
Yeah,
regards to the kid.
but his fear
Yeah.
could have been proven right just as quickly at a university like Loyola, where we have people like Sean Carroll, or not Sean Carroll, Sean McDowell, and Doctor Stephen, God, I can't remember his name now.
Well,
He'll
yeah,
come to
but
me
that's
later.
my point. Is you've got
Mayer, Stephen Mayer.
a bunch of like, if you've got a bunch of terrible people teaching those classes, then yeah, those people like aren't likely to change as a result of instruction. But what I was saying is because you're here, like these people will be better people in the end. You know, if you're doing your job, and that turned out to be the case with regards to him at least. Like, especially he was a loved professor on campus, even though he was. They called him the noble pagan because he wasn't a Catholic. He wasn't a Christian
Wait,
even.
you mean like Virgil?
Yes, yes, yeah, and yeah, and because we all read Dante, everyone kind of put him in a Virgilian sort of like role in the class, and he was like a super romantic teacher. Like you know, you could tell he was in love with what he was reading, and it was infectious, and it sort of made you love the material. And like even though people went into it like knowing he, you know, on a theological basis he disagreed with everything that they believed in, that it just made them curious as to why, you know, and that's kind of how he pulled people in. So at the end of the day, I mean, yeah, I'm sure there were some people who stayed conservative and have rhetorical tricks now because of what they learned from him. But I don't think that's the norm. I think most people are better people as a result of having him.
Oh, I wasn't saying that. I was pointing out that his fear in the moment
Yeah,
was well
yeah.
founded. It is only with the benefit of hindsight we can say that it is not. That's all. And so
Except I made the prediction that this would be the case.
but that was because you were making a prediction of your peers. He was making a prediction of his students. He was making an outside prediction. You were making an inside prediction. You had a greater predictive power in your secondary variables. That is why you were more than likely going to be the one that's correct in that situation. But his fear, he could not have known that. We can only know that now. What is that? 40 years later?
Yeah, 20 years later, yeah.
Oh yeah, I forget that you did it later in life because you did IT first. I forget about that sometimes.
Yeah.
But like I'm saying, like so you're still talking decades before that proof is in the pudding. He couldn't have known that, and it may have been your argument that actually made certain changes that he did that helped affect the outcome as well, because this is not a static vacuum problem like so many people, like when we talk about this, will be like, oh, this one variable, that variable. It may have been your conversation or a conversation he had with another colleague that then made him make minor tweaks and changes to where now what you said came perfectly true, to where 90% of them, as you said, are center left. And don't use the rhetoric for the negative outcomes. What about
Yeah, I think what he
what
did
about that
was
10%? Are those 10% really, really effective?
no, I would say not. I think they're your average conservative asshole.
I was asking because you know him. I don't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, that's
Yeah. So if they're not, then his fear was completely unfounded. But he could have been right, because then we get people like fucking
yeah.
Dr. Stephen Mayer, Dr. Michael Behe, etc., who are very gifted speakers and communicators, but end up teaching utter bullshit.
I would say Mike Johnson, right? The current Speaker of the House. Like, he's
Mm-hmm.
soft spoken. He's very likable, like personally, right? But he believes all this shit, you know.
I don't think he's likable personally, but that's because I've seen videos of him like making
Okay.
conversation. Yeah, but that's just a personal opinion.
When he's trying and he knows the cameras are on,
He's
he seems to
charismatic,
like, yeah.
is what I say. He is charismatic, because like nobody knew who the fuck he was. Now everybody knows who the fuck he is. And even though he's got a lot of problems in his past that most people would run away screaming from, he is able to keep everybody calm. That's a talent. I may not like the man. I'm going to give him credit with the talent he has, though. Like, the fact that he is able to keep all of his batshit lunacy in check enough to where people don't run away from him screaming, calling him Tinfoil Hat Man, that's a talent, and that's scary.
Yeah, and there's also the fact that he's willing to do like the things that are absolutely necessary for the country to do in order to like function. So like he meets that minimum bar, right? Which is he wants government to continue to exist, and he'll pass a CR, like a clean bill, that kind of stuff. Even though he believes all the crazy stuff or whatever, he's not willing to like end the government over it.
Yeah. At least not to my knowledge, I will not make that accusation. Yeah, well, here's the thing.
Yeah.
Will he do it? Yeah, will he do it? I don't know. I personally do not trust the man as far as I could throw his narrow behind. That being said, there's a lot of reasons.
Ukraine funding, like the last time around, right?
Yeah.
Like,
No, well,
I gotta give him credit for that.
I'm sorry, last person to say yes is not the person to necessarily save it, but that's a sticking point. That's a sticking point but that I'm not going to fight on. But all I'm going to say is I don't trust the man. He's far less damaging so far than I feared he would be, but he still is in that potentially dangerous position of he could be that damaging any moment now. And he scares the shit out of me because I can't fucking trust him at any given moment, because I've seen videos of what this man believes, and he will say what he needs to get the vote. He's admitted this fucking 10 years before he ever became speaker.
Yeah,
like we have videos of him in his church saying
like
this shit.
It's a super low bar, right? But
yeah.
I'm at least glad that we got that one thing.
I mean, I personally wish we hadn't gone through the whole process and got this lunatic. I think the original guy was better in the long run. But yeah, I really do. I do think McCarthy, getting rid of McCarthy in hindsight, was a mistake because we ended up with Johnson. But Johnson hasn't been nearly as damaging as I feared, and far less damaging that. But
McCarthy didn't, which is he can wrangle some MAGA people when necessary.
True, I agree. It's probably a yet, but I'm not going to say definitely yet because I hate doing definites. You know that. That being said, I will say this definitively: he is far less damaging than fucking Gymnasium Jordan would have been.
Yeah.
I think we could all agree that would have been a fucking clusterfuck and a half. I think even the Republicans figured that one out.
Yeah.
Well, and his history is even problematic for them.
Yeah.
Now, that being said,
get back to the
yep, I was about to say, Despy, you ought to pick up. We're at line, what's that? 49.
49, and then where am I going to?
Bottom of the cut. Are you looking at the screen?
Yeah, 66.
Yeah. So let me.
Okay, sounds good.
Let me get it nice and cropped for you.
That's good, right there. O blind cupidity, O wrath insane that spurs us onwards, so in our short life. And in the eternal, then so badly steeps us. I saw an ample moat bent like a bow, as one which all the plain encompasses, comfortable to what my guide had said. And between this and the embankment's foot, centaurs in file were running, armed with arrows, as in the world they used the chase to follow. Beholding us descend, each one stood still. And from the squadron 3 detached themselves. With bows and arrows they advanced selected. And from afar one cried, "Unto what torment come ye? Who down the hillside are descending? Tell us from there. If not, I draw the bow." My master said, "Our answer will we make to Chiron, near you there, in evil hour. That will of thine was evermore so hasty."
Alrighty, so we get to Chiron. Chiron is in hell for obvious reasons. Can't truly be in heaven if you're a fucking monstrous beast. Um, that being said, it to me this is significant because this is a parallel to parts of the Greek myths that Dante would have known. This is a parallel to a particular portion of Greek mythology where the centaurs actually come upon Heracles and his companion. And they basically do not know who he is because this is before he is who he becomes. And they are threatening to kill him, and he says he doesn't know Chiron's name, but he says, I'll explain myself to your leader, and they take him to Chiron. This is essentially a parallel between this of Virgil saying, no, take me to your leader, fuck off, you're beneath me. Like, that's just how I take this, because, like, why would he answer these people who are threatening him when he's gonna have to answer again to the leader, and after this point, why repeat himself?
Yeah.
And just for those who don't know, Heracles is the Greek name of what most people know as Hercules.
Yes, sorry.
No,
I forget. I forget people don't remember that.
Yeah, most people know Disney, and so or are familiar.
No,
with,
you're right. I should have remembered.
No, I'm just pointing it out. So yeah, to those who don't know, Hercules is the Roman name. Heracles is the Greek.
Yeah, and most people don't know that.
Yeah, why all of our modern retellings of that myth use the Roman name when it is originally a Greek legend, I have no idea, but that's how it is.
There is some historians who believe that the reason for that is because the actual story of Hercules attaining godhood does not come until the Roman era, because he actually laterally becomes a god, why he gets so recognized by that name.
I could see that.
I don't know if I buy it, but I mean, at least it makes sense if the chronology lines up the way they say it does.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just saying, I could see that as being a plausible explanation if his godhood was not established until the Romans got a hold of him.
Yeah, I'd have to dig into that because I don't know Greek, so I can't go back and do that. I'd have to dig harder on that. And there's not easy peasy apps like there are for like biblical scriptures in Greek to like go through and like get all the easy like click, okay, this translates to this is how this relates to this, etc. Yeah, so it's much more difficult to do. That being said, if true, makes sense. It's kind of why we don't view the god of borders as the Greek name. We use Terminus, because before that he was only a demigod.
What is the Greek name?
Oh, I forget it. Like, honestly, it's one of those, because he was a demigod. It was like he was but he was a demigod in the sense that he was born to like one of the monster races. Like, I think he was a child of a god and a cyclops, I think.
Yeah. Oh, so actually, this reminds me, going back to the fact that Chiron and the other centaurs are in hell. Mainly because when I look up Chiron, it describes him as the wisest and justest of all the centaurs. And to me, that speaks so much in the way that Virgil is in purgatory because he is a virtuous pagan. I kind of would have expected at least Chiron, if not the other centaur, to also have been a denizen of purgatory as opposed to hell, because though he is a
Virgil
beast,
is a denizen of hell.
Yeah, he's
I thought Virgil was a denizen of purgatory.
No, Temple of Light.
No. Temple of Light is the basically the least offensive part of hell.
Yeah, he
misunderstood.
that's why we get a different guide for a couple of tercets, then we get what's her name through Purgatorio.
Well, no, because I've
Beatrix.
looked this one up before
Yeah.
because
Beatrice.
Virgil accompanies Dante
And
throughout
makes them
the
makes
entirety
them
of
all the way.
Purgatory. It's only at the very very end, like there's
Mhm.
there's 3 or 4 tercets where he has both Virgil uh and the other guy, like the guy that he meets near the very end
But
of
he
Purgatory,
but he
and then he
cannot
switches
go
off with
for because he
yeah,
cannot
he
even
cannot go
get that
further.
close to heaven. He
Yes,
is
but
not even supposed to go into purgatory except for these intercessions.
okay, fair enough.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah,
he's a
I
resident of
thought
the
the
Temple of Light.
I thought the Temple of Light was like at the bottommost level of purgatory, as a rather
Well,
than the topmost
clo-
level of hell.
close enough. It's the border.
Okay,
Like is the best way to describe it. It's the border.
so
It's Tijuana. There you
yeah, which makes me wonder what Dante's theological understanding of these sort of these non-human creatures have been, because like he's mixing a lot of Christian and Greek
Well,
theology here.
in this time period of the supernatural within the 14th century Italy, they had lots of cryptids in their folklore. Like he would not have been opposed to monstrous creatures like in imagining. Like that
No,
wouldn't have been
that's not what I'm asking though,
oh,
because it I like more about what would the origin of them have been if you
Virgil's
had thought about
writings.
that. Well, I mean more within the theology, because God created, obviously God created everything, but then where did these various monsters come from? Where were as far
Ah,
I'm not even sure
okay.
if we fully know where centaurs come from within Greek mythology, but then if you transpose those origins into a Christian theology, you know, presumably the
I don't
gods.
know the origin of the centaurs from memory, but I'm pretty sure there is a myth about it. That being said, I get what you're saying, but it would have been his love of Virgil, which is why he is using these influences on hell. Hence why he maps Hades onto hell. And we
Yes.
get the rivers of the underworld into hell as opposed to just a burning lake of fire as is described within the actual Bible. And circles of hell were realms of punishments in relation to proximity to Satan, not depth of hell. Like
Well,
that came later.
it is worth noting that even in the biblical texts, like Hades is a name used for hell on
Mm-hmm.
multiple occasions, or rather, Hades is one of the Greek words which we translate into English as hell. There are
Well, no, they did too, and the reason that we do it is because they were transposing the concept of Hades as the place, not just the person, onto the concept of hell because it was Greek people converting to Christianity. So this was the parent religion to the converted religion. There are going to be transpositions within it's natural within every conversion at this rate.
well, no, what I was talking about is the fact that in the English version of the Bible, the word hell is a translation of two, I think maybe three, but I can't remember the third one, different words.
Mm-hmm.
So in the Greek, there's Hades, there's I don't remember if the Valley of Gehenna or
Mm-hmm.
might be a title. Anyways, and then there's a third one I cannot remember, and a third word.
But the third one doesn't come from Greek; it comes from Hebrew. But yeah,
Oh, Sheol, right?
yeah,
Sheol.
and this is my point: it is because of the Greeks' conversion of the parent religion from the parent religion into Christianity, they are going to, as they are now writing the New Testament in Greek, going to be transposing certain concepts because they're concepts within their native language. It's naturally going to occur. It happens when the Mesopotamians move further or deeper into Europe, when the Greeks move further into Asia Minor. so on and so forth. Like every time cultures interact, this happens.
Of course, you had to say Mesopotamians, which put they might be giants into my head. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome for that, but you get what I'm saying. It's whenever
Yes.
these kind of like moving or these migrations of force, because these are all done through conquest. These migrations of force, the converted culture brings in parts of their culture. We call it inculcation from the conqueror side. They call it trying to hold on to what little they can on theirs.
Yeah, yeah, and my question at the start, it was really I guess to really get an answer to this, I'd probably have to jump into the mind of Dante or someone in the 14th century to understand this. But it was the question of I'm curious in what way they melded these mythologies. So, how in the Christian theology of the time would would a centaur have fit in? Where might it have come from? How are we connecting? Say, let's just say for the sake of argument, because I don't know off the top of my head, we'll go with Apollo being the father of the centaur. I'm sure that's not right, but it's not the point.
Yeah, just for the
The
sake of
point is,
argument.
like, yeah, for the sake of argument, like, how do the Greek gods like Apollo and Zeus and Ares and Athena, how do they play into the Christian theology of there is one God who created all else? And
Well, if we're gonna I mean, we're gonna have to dig further into it, but I'll give a very quick set of examples. Ares would be attributed to one of the four horsemen, and obviously we could figure out which one.
yes,
We'd get the same from Ceres, because well, she is also the goddess of grain. She is also the goddess of famine, so on and so forth. Like
yes,
the four horsemen are a direct correlative to certain Greek gods and demigods. We can also look at certain denizens of hell, like when we get into the demonology of the third and fourth centuries, like we get the names of Asmodeus and Demogorgon and a few others, that these denizens of hell that would also be corollaries to other myths of either Greek or earlier Mesopotamian religions that had persisted through. Um, Kind of the way that all folklore is created, it is an amalgam of the cultures that come before it.
yes.
And this would be the quickest direct corollaries is the four horsemen and that. Beyond that, we'd have to dig far deeper because there's 327 gods, demigods, and so on. So, like, yeah, dude, there's a lot. And not all of them are going to have corollaries, and some of them are going to be 15 amalgamated into one corollary. So,
Yeah, fair.
um, that
And
being said,
like, it was mostly just a question, kind of curiosity, because like this is from a modern observer seeing
mhm.
how disparate these two sets of theology mythology are, and seeing them mashed together in this fairly unique way, or unique from my perspective, I guess. And seeing like there are a lot of conflicts here in how I view them, and I'm just curious, okay, how did they melt them, or did they just ignore a lot of those contradictions for the sake of artistry or convenience or whatever?
Mm, some of it's going to be for the latter, but especially this far separated. But like initially it's going to be this is what they know, so this is what gets adapted in because human memory is imperfect, and therefore like as they convert they're going to as they go on, certain stories will be misremembered into the new mythology, so that because oh, I remember this, it couldn't be from that old dirty religion, it had to have been from this, and then it gets added over time culturally, blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
Like I mean, it like I said, we could track this back through anthropological means far more extensively if we were to actually like dig into the anthropology papers on this subject, which there are several. But it's many hours worth of secondary research. That being
Mm,
said, if you would like to pick up at line 67, you get to read about Dayanara, which is always a fun part. And it looks like you'll be going to 84.
All right. Then touched he me and said, "This one is Nessus, who perished for the lovely Deianira, and for himself did vengeance take. And he in the midst, who at his breast is gazing, is the great Chiron who brought up Achilles. That other Pholus is, who was so wrathful. Thousands and thousands go about the moat, shooting with shafts whatever soul emerges out of the blood, more than his crime allots. Near we approached unto those monsters' fleet. Chiron an arrow took, and with the notch backward upon his jaws he put his beard. After he had uncovered his great mouth, he said to his companions, Are you ware that he behind moveth whatever he touches? Thus are not wont to do the feet of dead men. And my good guide, who now was at his breast, where the two natures are together joined. I'm going to go a little farther just because that doesn't feel like a good stopping point. Replied, Indeed he lives, and thus alone. Me it behooves to show him the dark valley. Necessity and not delight impels us.
Okay.
That felt like a better stopping point.
Yeah, and I mean, I was stopping there because we got to a break in the line where it would have been a pause, which is why it breaks in the tercet. But that's fine. It works either way. Kitty, you're being a butt. I'm streaming. Why are you being needed? Go away. Okay, so as we get into this, Dayanara is, for those of you who are not old enough to remember the 90s TV show, this is the wife of Heracles. This is a significance because it's one of Chiron's contrapassos in his own mind. Like if you go into the Greek myths, the failing to protect Dayanara is one of the things that he considers his greatest failings in life. So like this is, at least in my eyes, significance because he Dante is showing the juxtaposition of like the old mythology matching on to modern mythology of Christianity, or 14th century modern to him theology, because of the idea of contrapasso to your hell, of you create your own hell. The gates of hell are unlocked. You could leave at any time. It is your sins that prevent you from leaving and keep you separated from God. You are the one to blame. In this, he's showing that the melancholy felt by Chiron is his contrapasso. And then he goes in to tell you who Chiron is.
Yeah.
Everybody's so quiet.
Let's see. I'm just wondering because there was another mentioned here named Pholus who.
Oh yeah. I did not bother looking him up, but the name sounds vaguely familiar. I think Pholus, 72 Pholus. I think Pholus is a relation to another trainer like Philomenes, but that just could be bad memory.
Okay, I looked him up real quick. A short description is a wise centaur and friend of Heracles who lived in a cave near Mount Pelion. So
yeah, the one who trained Aeolus in the bow. Yeah, that's him.
Okay.
He's also somebody else who was killed by Hercules.
Well, yeah, because if I'm remembering the myth correctly, and it's been many, many years, so I could be wrong, his wife was killed. He goes into a black rage and tries to murder the entire town, and Hercules has to kill him.
Yeah, and Sayer says the three centaurs possibly typify three passions, which may lead to violence, which would be wrath, lust, and the will to dominate. So I guess Pholus must be the will to dominate.
Interesting. Well, I'd call Pholus Wrath, and if anything, if this is the connection, then Chiron would be the will to dominate, since he is the greatest teacher of heroes in the history of Greek mythology.
Yeah, could be.
But that wouldn't make sense, at least to me, like, unless there is some take on Chiron I have not read on, because, like, Chiron wasn't a domineering teacher. Like, it just that feels more like they're confusing Chiron and Philometus, the teacher of Hercules, the satyr teacher of Hercules.
I mean, of the three, the one that she talks about most is Nessus, who attempted to carry off Dianara, the wife of Hercules, taking her over a river on his back. Heroes killed him with an arrow, and the dying Nessus told Dianara to take some of his blood, since it would act upon Hercules as a love charm. Dianara did so, and later, fearing that Hercules was falling in love with another woman, put on him a shirt steeped in the blood of Nessus. The blood was poisonous, and after suffering intolerable agonies, Hercules placed himself on a pyre of wood and had himself burned to death.
Mm-hmm.
Rough.
Yeah, yeah, people forget how Hercules dies. That's not one that hits the movies too often. Although they did do an episode with Nessus in they did do an episode of with Nessus in the 90s Hercules show. But when he was poisoned, then he had to go meet with the river god with the one horn that gives us the Capricornia, and he had to bathe in the waters of that river to become, like, purified from the poison.
I think if you put the reason he had to do his labors in the cartoon, I think that would probably scare a lot of kids too. The fact that he murdered his entire family.
Yeah, I mean, then we get into the whole thing of, like, forced compulsion and what it would be like if a deity put their hand up your back and used you like a fucking sock puppet like that, and blah 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 blah. There's not I mean, but not exactly age appropriate for most kids. Like, how do you explain that to an 8-year-old, like, and not either come off as disingenuous, condescending, or traumatizing?
I mean, traumatizing for sure. I mean, I remember being shocked reading the Iliad, because the gods are always taking over people and making them do things. And then the mortals are punished for the things that the gods made them do.
Yep.
But that I, as a 21st century person, I couldn't help myself. Like, I just automatically saw that in terms of legal insanity, about how, like, the worst natures of our own souls, do.
My modern interpretation went the other way, of this is the equivalent of psychological rape, but
right. So are we? But I don't think that's mutually exclusive, right? Like, do we?
No, I was just pointing out we just had different angles to the same approach.
We feel like we're being psychologically raped by, like, parts of our own brain, that are starting to act in ways that we can't fully control. Like when we hear voices in our own heads that tell us to do things.
Or in this case,
Don't even
gods.
Get me started on a corpus callosectomy.
Yes,
well, exactly. Well, there's that too.
Those
but
are the gods, right? Those parts of your brain that you don't have total control over. Those are
it's
gods
also
reaching in and making you do things.
Well, there's that, but it's also, like, for me, it's
when metaphor is good enough, it seems quite literal.
Well, but the implication of this within the Greek mythology, the way these stories would have been told, these are essentially parables to their culture to try and teach lessons. This lesson is, no matter drunken, out of control, in grief, out of control, etc., whatever your body does, you're responsible for. I think is the parable these stories are trying to explain to them, is it doesn't matter how out of control you are, you will be held responsible for the actions of your body.
I mean, I know you will be held responsible for them, but quite often the characters will complain of the unfairness of that. Like, Ajax makes that complaint, right? When he goes insane and kills all those sheep. And because a goddess made him do it or whatever, made him do it. And he's
No,
quite
no,
embarrassed afterwards. But and people do make fun of him for it, and they hold him responsible for it and everything else. But he thinks that's unfair. Like he's like,
he should, and they shouldn't. That's kind of the
And
that's
aren't
the
well,
parable.
aren't they lucky?
I mean, that's
Aren't they lucky?
yeah, that's the point. I think the parable's teaching is life's unfair. Whether you should be held responsible or not, you will be.
I
Right.
think they're lucky that they get to get what is it judged by their actions instead of judged by the what is it
Conceived notions.
preconceived notions and what was it and assumptions that people make of them.
I mean, well, I think this was more. It's trying to point out because like these are going to be stories that are ironically told to kids. That in third millennium BCE fucking Greece. These are stories told to kids. Basically, stop doing dumb shit. This is the we have evolved, but this is the original. Don't put your hand on the grill shit. Because you're going to be held responsible whether or not you knew better, whether or not you were fucking drunk, whether if you set the house on fire, you're the arsonist, whether you did it intentionally or not, so on and so forth. Just to go back to another Greek myth that got translated into Christian mythology.
It's honestly shocking how many of the Greek myths got translated even to modern Christianity, where you can clearly see they have no no real source in the Bible, and yet they're still commonly thought of as within the Christian theology of today.
There's that harmonization of survival of this the cultures being subsumed by the greater, trying to bring their culture in what little bit to keep it survival.
Yep.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
Like this is why we can trace it back so adequately. Is like we know history is written by the victors. Archaeology tells the story of everybody. Now that we know how to differentiate between the two, we get a much richer story of our history and what happened very, very quickly.
Indeed.
Now that being said, back to the reading. Someone withdrew from singing Hallelujah. Who unto me committed this new office? No thief is he, nor I a thievish spirit. But by that virtue through which I am moving my steps along this savage thoroughfare, give us some one of thine to be with us, and who may show us where to pass the ford, and who may carry this one on his back, for 'tis no spirit can walk the air. On his right breast Chiron wheeled about, and said to Nessus, turn and do thou guide them, and warn aside, if other band may meet you. We with faithful escort onward moved, along the brink of the vermilion boiling, wherein there boiled the utter loud laments. People I saw within up to the eyebrows, and the great centaurs said, tyrants are these, who dealt in bloodshed and in pillaging. Here they lament their pitiless mischiefs. Here is Alexander. Here is and fierce Dionysus, who upon Sicily brought dolorous years. That forehead there which has the hair so black as Azulin, and the other who is blonde, Abizio of Etsi, who in truth up in the world was by his stepson slain. And then turned I to the poet, and he said, now he be first to thee, and second I. Okay, so we just went over a lot of names, and I'll have to just stop right there because we don't really get a chance to go back and get into these. So, as we are getting into these tyrants, Dionysus, this is not the god that they're referring to. It is a ruler by the same name. Warlord, to be more accurate. Alexander, in this time period, is not considered a great leader like he is in modern day. He is considered a tyrant. He is considered an actual savage warlord who damn near conquered the world in 14th century Europe. He is not viewed in a positive light in any way, shape, or form. Azalin, I am less familiar with, but Abizo Avetsi is a absolute fucking monster who butchered tons of fucking people and was killed by his fucking stepson when he went to go try and kill his sister.
So just for Azalin, Longfellow's commentary specifies Azolino or Azolino di Romani, tyrant of Padua, nicknamed the son of the devil.
Yeah, I know nothing about him historically beyond what the commentaries say. I have no fucking clue. And that's why I don't want to comment, because as we have pointed out in a few cases, depending on when the commentary is written, the commentary is wrong. And I know nothing about him. Rich, you got anything from history or Despy?
Yeah, well, just Musa says Azolino was a Ghibelline chief and tyrant of the March of Treviso. He was notoriously cruel and committed such inhuman atrocities as he was called the son of Satan.
Okay, so same kind of comment as the other
So
commentaries
that
where
might
this
explain
bring
the
up his
comment
history.
about being a stepson.
No, stepson is Obizo Avetsi, not Azalin.
Okay.
Abizo Avetsi was a monster, ended up killing parts of his family. He was killed by his stepson when he went to go kill his stepdaughter, the stepson's sister.
So something I wanted to point out here, and this is more of a more than the commentary on translation. So the first line of this reading, someone withdrew from singing hallelujah, who unto me committed this new office. No thief is he, nor I a thievish spirit. When I first heard the line, someone withdrew from singing hallelujah, for
Yeah.
some reason, my brain translated that as someone who betrayed betrayed heaven, betrayed God, as opposed to someone who was given a mission to and in order to fulfill the mission had to temporarily stop their singing and come perform this mission. And like, it's just, that's how sometimes the more archaic language that Longfellow uses can give the wrong idea without a
Well, the way I interpreted it was he was stolen from singing the praises that all would have to sing in the afterlife, is the way I read it. But
yeah, and it's just the way it was worded gave me the wrong impression of what was meant at first. So just
no, it's fair enough.
How
I choose Longfellow because it's easier to read in general, and yes, well, sometimes it's tongue-tying. Honestly, try reading through Sayers. You'll want to bang your head against a wall. Like, reading it, not reading it, just reading it is great. Reading it out loud, oh my god. To put it into perspective for you, Despy, it feels like that 126 line fucking monologue by Puck in Midsummer's. It makes your tongue feel tired after every line. It Sayers, very beautifully written. I would charge $100 an hour to read this shit out loud if I was doing this as a live reading in person. As you can see, I'll do Longfellow for free. Now, that being said,
hey, and then we know the reason why that is because he uses lamentations more than anybody else.
Not precisely, exactly, but I can't say it's not a benefit. Yeah, I mean, I got 3 laments in one little section. Come on, man. Who else is gonna give me that? Now, Despy, if you want to pick up, or Rich, we don't have to continue going round robin now that we've all went once. We can switch up the order if we want.
Rich, do you want to go?
What's the line number?
115. And it looks like you'd be going to 126 or finishing out to 132.
Okay. A little farther on, the centaur stopped above a folk who was far down as the throat seemed from that boiling stream to issue forth a shade. He showed us on the one side alone, saying, He cleft he cleft asunder in God's bosom the heart that still upon the Thames is honored. Then people saw I, who from out the river lifted their head, and also all the chest, and many of these I recognized. Thus, evermore and evermore grew shallower that blood, so that the feet alone it covered, and there across the moat our passage was. Even as thou here upon this side beholdest the boiling stream that I diminishes, the centaur said, I wish thee to believe that on this other more and more declines its bed until it reunites itself where it behoveth tyranny to groan.
Yeah. Okay. So now the reason I didn't just want you to just finish it out is because, like, as they're pointing this out, like, this is a rather lengthy description of a ford. Everybody knows what a fucking ford is in the 14th century. The point to this is to show the care that the centaurs take to help them get across this river. This is, at least in my eyes, to show the virtuousness of Chiron and his compatriots, much like Virgil. They do what is the right thing to do, even if they do not have the holy virtues to get out of hell.
Well, this kind of feels and it goes back to the contrapasso idea of, like, if you know, if one basically one keeps oneself in hell through guilt, or whatever that may be, which I and maybe I'm misunderstanding the what Dante's theology here is, if he believes that someone could get themselves out of hell by releasing that burden, or if there's a if I'm misunderstanding.
Well, at least in my understanding, he is, if you are in hell, it is not in your character that you could ever give up that burden. If you
Oh,
could give up that burden, you would be in purgatory.
I see. Oh, something else I noticed earlier, which was I had seen the presence of the centaurs in hell as a punishment for them, but it almost seems, based on their description, that they are not being punished so much as they are the punishers of the damned, as it sounded like they were, shooting arrows at those who might come up from the river.
Well, there's that, but they're in hell. They are also being punished by the fact that they have to war with other bands of centaurs, which is mentioned, because you have to ward
Oh,
off other groups. They have to war, like they are in a constant state of war with on the plains around the rivers of blood within this hell.
oh,
Is the way it is being depicted. Well, it's not specifically overtly said, but it's pointed. Oh, you have to wave off the other bands that see them so they don't attack these spirits. That's showing that this is a realm of violence, not just within the river but on the land as well.
It's really interesting. It reminds me a lot of like the oni in Japanese mythology, especially the ones in hell, in Japanese hell, because they are also warring, and they're tasked with basically torturing people for all eternity.
And even though this is still out of date, but something that is easy enough to look up on YouTube for you youngins. If you want to see a good, like, semi-modern representation of this, look at Ronin warriors. The enemy warriors are all modeled on Oni of one form or another, or gods of different religions. Anubis, etc. You remember
Oh,
the
yeah. Well, that's like, yeah. I was about to say, like, if you're saying they're modeled after Oni, I mean, that's the whole purpose of the Japanese armor itself, is to look like a manifestation of an Oni.
well,
as
but
a
what I
point
was
of
talking about is
inspiration.
those particular enemy that the Ronin warriors fight are constantly warring and tasked with punishing the damned. That was what I was
Oh
pointing
yeah.
to.
Okay. Yeah.
Because that is pretty much what they're doing when they're not fighting or tracking down the Ronin warriors, is they're punishing people for big Lord what's his face.
Tulpa.
Yeah. But yeah, that's pretty much their whole thing. But it's very easy to find that on YouTube, so you can see a quick anime interpretation of this action actually happening. I'm sure there's other ones, but it's the one that comes to my mind because it's so, like, obvious. Like, they really didn't do any subtlety with it at all.
Oh, sorry to bring it back to the previous bit of
No, no.
reading. It was the thing you said about Alexander, how he was viewed in the 14th century as a
As a
tyrant,
warlord.
yeah,
As a
oh,
warlord, not a tyrant, but as a warlord.
okay. Whereas we tend to view him in a much more positive light today, and this brought me to the idea of, like, how we have sort of glorified the might makes right type of thinking within our views of
I don't
history.
think that's why we view Alexander as great now. I think we view him as great as somebody who, in a time period when what he wanted to accomplish, for all intents and purposes, should have been impossible, he pulled it off. It was
Yeah.
monstrous. But he pulled off something that should not have been possible. I think that's the reason why great man theory is dangerous. It could be a little bit of might makes right, but I think with him, it's more he did the impossible. Like, we even view people like H. Holmes, who is a monster. He's not viewed in a positive light by history, but we still view him as somebody who pulled off the impossible. He became a serial killer who literally operated directly under the nose of society, with like police entering his home and shit, like, while he was killing people and not getting caught. Like, fucking, like, absolutely insane. Yet we bring this person up as a great evil, but a great person of history.
Yeah.
And Alexander the Great, they view more neutrally because, while it was monstrous what he was doing, if we're being honest, he was no more monstrous than any of his neighbors.
Yeah, fair.
Like, I'm sure that there were some peaceful nations that got fucked in the conquering, but in the grand scheme of things, they probably would have got conquered by one of the other neighbors who would have done equally fucked up shit to them. Like, it's our modern interpretation of these morals that give us this turpitude against it, because we know better now. They did not know better then. We have to take
Well, and also,
certain
as
recency
anybody finds
bias.
out in game theory, you find out very quickly that there's a certain amount of peacefulness that doesn't work, that backfires, that just makes you victim of the other person in the game. And so you kind of have to be as peaceful as you can without triggering those consequences of not being ready.
Thanks for tickling my brain on that one, because yes, most people, and I know your students won't be one of the ones that are watching this, but when we get into, like, kids that are watching this for uni, take game theory as an elective course for one of your bonus classes. It will help you so much. Become a multi-step thinker. It is highly, highly valuable in anything you do. Anything you do. Cooking, writing, anything. I can't think of a single field multi-step thinking does not help you. And specifically game theory will help you as an interdisciplinary study. Can you, Despy? I think it even helps in theater, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, even theater. Would it help with linguistics? Yeah, it would help with linguistics because of group game theory. Education within the group to create greater cohesiveness within the group understanding. Yeah, so
All right, I'm getting ready to walk out the door, but when you get to the last passages, the Musa column has a lot of good footnotes in the spreadsheet.
Okay, so I will have Ancom or Despy read those since I'm not going to open it while we're streaming. But we are almost done. If you could stay for, I mean, we'll get done with this reading in seconds. Okay.
A few more minutes.
Okay, so Despy, do you want to finish us out?
Okay, and which?
It's It's literally the last little cut.
Okay. Justice divine upon this side is goading that Attila, who was a scourge on earth, and Pyrrhus and Sextus, and forever milks. The tears which with the boiling it unseals. In Reiner de Corneto and Reiner Pazzo, who made upon the highways so much war. Then back he turned and passed again the ford.
Yeah, so he went back across the river to go back to his duty. So, what I'll point to is I believe it's Rainier de Corneto and Rainier Pazzo, and I believe this is
Rainier del Corneto and Rainier Pazzo.
Yeah, and I believe Rainier is a title that is essentially like highwayman, like not literally, but it's the same kind of concept of a brigand on the road. I think. I'm not positive because it reminds me of the concept of the original privateers, which were not ocean-going privateers, but land-based privateers operating on roads of enemy soil. I could be wrong, but that's what the word reminds me of. Okay, so Rich, what was the commentary you wanted to bring up real quick? And that line, but go ahead.
If you just go right down like the Musa column or whatever. By the way, I just want to say, I cannot hear Attila without hearing some like British documentarian saying Attila. Because they like to pronounce everything the British way, no matter where the word comes from.
The only one who was the only one who was really good about that was Attenborough, and even he did it on occasion.
Yeah. But I always thought it was entertaining.
For me, funnily,
other people's like pronunciations, but
for me, Attila, I always imagined Gerard Butler because he played Attila in a miniseries. It was actually pretty good.
And there was that. So anyway, for the footnote against him, against Attila, known as the Scourge of the Earth, Attila, king of the Huns, was called the Scourge of God. Because of his tyrannical cruelty, he conquered most of Italy in 452, but Pope Leo the Great went out to meet him as he was approaching Rome and persuaded him to turn back. One of the great rhetorical stories in history. If it's
yeah, but it bugs me because history still fucks it up. Why did Attila turn when the Pope talked to him?
Right.
Why? No, I know the reason. Because Attila converted.
Probably them gold, I would imagine.
No, Attila converted. Attila was a Christian.
Oh, right.
By the end of his life. That is why. The gold, don't get me wrong, was part of it too. You're right on that score as well. But he was also a Christian. The Pope coming out to talk to him meant more to him than conquering Rome.
Yeah, did you guys ever watch that TV show, The Vikings?
Mm-hmm. I haven't watched the sequel series of Valhalla, but I've watched the first one.
I mean, he essentially, like, the main character of that show, like, becomes Christian, which is kind of interesting because the myth that he comes from, the epic poem that he comes from, was itself sort of rewritten by Christians, right? So
Hmm.
the poem itself becomes baptized,
Hmm.
and therefore the character in the story in the TV
The
show,
saga of Ragnar
history show,
Lothbrok.
becomes baptized. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, well, and this comes from actually not Ragnar specifically, but the sacking of the if you watch that show, the very first episode or second episode, it's whenever the first time they get to the shores of England, they run into and sack this one particular monastery at that I
Yeah,
can't
it's a
remember
shocking scene because they just ruthlessly murder all these peaceful
but
monks.
it is the colony
Mhm.
in history that is established on that site by the Norris that laterally becomes like the Anglo-Saxon portion of the population within northern England, that canonizes the saga of Ragnar within UK folklore. It is actually that thing that they show at the beginning of the TV series. That initial attack is also the initial colony point where these stories started to spread into England.
Right. And of course, it makes sense that as cultures merge, people start to change and start to adopt customs of other people's. Like, it's all over the place, right? Like Alexander, the same way. Like Alexander was Macedonian, but when he conquers Greece, he becomes Greek, and then when he goes east, he becomes Persian. Like
And
he
when
becomes
he conquers the Kush, they even called him Indian for a time.
right, and in a way, it kind of seems like, at least mythologically, like metaphorically, the
Yeah,
places that
now,
he conquers, in fact, conquer him.
well, to a point, yes, but it's also in the first two examples, it was viewed as a positive because he was subsuming these cultures into Macedonian culture, and Macedonian culture was becoming these greater cultures and influencing them. But when they called him Indian or Kushian, I think is the
Yeah, the
right
Greeks
term
felt
they call
betrayed.
them, they it was an insult. The same exact behavior that they had praised him for up to that point.
Well, because the Greeks wanted, as long as he was Greek, the Greeks sort of accepted their being conquered because at least he was one of them, or at least he gave the impression that he was one of them. But then we tried those same tactics on others. The Greeks felt betrayed. They were like, "Wait a minute, you're Greek. You're not Indian. Like, why are you doing this?" And now, then suddenly, it seemed like they'd been conquered by a foreigner.
Yeah, and like I said, it's interesting when we get into the history of like why we view him as great. Now, it's not because he wasn't a monster. He was. It's because he did the impossible. And anybody who does the impossible for the first time, first dude who broke the sound barrier, we're always going to remember Jaeger's name forever. It's just that's never not going to be the dude who broke the sound barrier for humans.
Yeah, some people say Christianity couldn't have happened without Alexander. I think that's probably correct because it's
Probably.
that mixing of ideas, right? The Hellenistic ideas with the local and more indigenous ideas that sort of allowed
Uh,
both groups to
I
grow up
don't
with
know
each
if
other.
I'd blame Alexander for the concept of inculcation, but maybe the furtherance of it, because that's a concept that had existed, I mean, pretty much since we had nation states, long before Alexander.
But in reality, if we're going to come together as a world, right? Like it's sort of inevitable that our ideas are going to merge and shift and finally fall.
Hybridize and yeah. No, 100% agreed. And
So when you say blame, I don't know. Inculcation might be something that's necessary for humanity to grow. But maybe that's a little bit of Teilhard de Chardin, right? Like the one world mind, the hive mind that we're supposed to eventually become.
well, more what I was saying is the blaming of the concept of the erasure of the conquered people, because it was something that predates him, but we attribute it more to him because he conquered more of the known world of anybody until Chinggis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
Like it's one of those things. And then Chinggis was the greatest conqueror of all time because of how much he conquered. So on and so forth.
Yeah.
Uh for those who end up watching this, Chinggis is proper way to say Genghis Khan. Chinggis is his name. Sorry, I can't help it.
Unless you go to the Mongolian Grill.
Well, yeah, I mean,
One of those
but
over there, but there's-
no, actually, we have a place in my town that's a Mongolian barbecue that my wife
yeah.
loves. In fact, when Ty came and visited us, that's where we went and ate, was that place.
Well, I'm sure he would like that.
Oh yeah, I'm not. He said he liked the food. He seemed to enjoy it. But it's a Mongolian barbecue. If you ever been to one, they're all pretty much the same. This just happens to be a pretty good one. But I will say Chinggis in there, and I get smiles from the waitresses because I say it correctly. Because like they're not used to people saying it correctly. They're used to everybody saying Genghis or Kublai.
Right. That makes sense.
Because everybody knows, it's not Kublai. Kublai is his private name. The conqueror was Kubla, his title.
Well, Kublai is also Chinggis's grandson.
Yes, but Kublai was his private name. Kubla was what he would use on the battlefield.
Okay.
Yeah, it's little bits of history that if they appreciate you knowing it when you know it. And the only reason, funnily enough, that I know it, studying Marco Polo.
In the swimming pool?
No. Yeah, you just dated us, Rich. Marco Polo, like, I had to explain that game to my grandkids.
So they don't play that anymore?
No, they do like ring things and like they have games now, but yeah, they play different games that let me rephrase that. They play games that are almost identical but by different names. Because they were like, "Oh, you mean like this?" And I'm like, "No. Only the people who are seeking are with their eyes closed. Only Marco is with his eyes closed." That being said, big tangent. But no, studying Marco Polo and his travels and time period within China and Mongolia is how I eventually learned how wrong we were about, well, everything to do with him. Like the Western concept of Chinggis is wildly inaccurate, and we have known that since Marco Polo. Like, it's not even like we just learned this shit. We've known it for a long time.
Right. Something I find interesting here is Chinggis was active about a century before Dante wrote this, and if he was, as you're saying, a greater conqueror than was Attila, his absence here is interesting.
What did Chinggis not do?
That's an open question, and I don't know what you're trying to get at.
Invade Europe.
Whereas Attila did. All right, fair enough.
I am guessing, personally, greater news of everything that had happened through the conquering of Chinggis did not spread to Europe for about 100 to 150 years after the fact, due to the fact that we would have had to have relied on the spread through trade route rather than proper, like, true communal interrelation. And trade route transport of knowledge is slower and one of the most inaccurate. So you end up having to go through multiple iterations before the truth comes out. I think that's why we end up with the myth of the monster of Chinggis. Because Chinggis was not actually a horrible ruler. I mean, everyone's like, oh, he did mountains of skulls of people that were already dead. He didn't go around and behead a bunch of live people to make those
that told him no. I mean, like,
well, that too, but those were collected over time. Those are collected over time, but more what I was pointing to is like the mountains of skulls, the pyramids of skulls that they talk about. Those are from enemies that were killed in battle. He didn't then just like go and like murder a bunch of POWs to make like the myths that we have about Chinggis is that he was the devil incarnate. The reality was he was better than most of the Chinese rulers he usurped.
Yeah. I'm just
Not
saying,
all, but most.
He was pretty reasonable until you told him no.
Well, to be more accurate, told him no in front of his throne. He was only ruthless when he was sitting at court. When he was on the battlefield, he was far more merciful, funnily enough. Again, myth does not meet the reality. Because, like, there's tens of thousands that he released after certain battles when he could have ransomed them, and he was just like, nah, just get the fuck out of here. I don't feel like dealing with you. Go away. Go back to your homes. I don't give a shit. I don't care that you fought me. Just don't pick up arms again or I'll kill you. Like, that was pretty much how he treated it. Whereas the people he was conquering, let's just say their answer to insubordination was more severe.
Yeah.
You can back me up on this with your Asian folklore and history knowledge. How many generations of their family did they kill if they caught you fucking up?
Oh, in Japan?
No, in Song Dynasty China.
It might have just been one or two.
In Japan, I know it was 3.
Yeah. Well, no.
Well, depending on the era.
Yeah, the curse lasts for 3 generations. But the thing is that like you're basically screwed for 3 generations. The thing is that a lot with Bushido, when people had like this level of shame brought on them, this is why they committed suicide. And they killed their family members too.
Yeah, I forgot about the family annihilation in the earlier periods. That didn't stop until, God, what was it, Meiji? It was later.
Much.
Yeah, it was much later. Yeah. My Japanese history is okay, but not perfect, and it only goes back so far.
Yeah.
Like, pretty much I know your feudal era. I don't know much about before. I don't know a whole lot after. Like, that's the time period I know. Now, that's a pretty big period for you guys, but still, it's one period. Well, 7 periods, but
it also depends on like
which one of the 7 periods of feudal era?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like, you have like the Kamakura. You have the Madomachi. Madomachi.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
And then there's the one that starts with the H.
Well, Heian is different. Like Heian is technically like the peaceful era. And then basically you have the Kamakura that comes after that, which is the like blood, guts, and gore.
Well, I was more just pointing out it was still feudal. Like, it may have been more peaceful, but it was still feudal. Like,
right.
If I remember correctly, and it's been a few years, that was the birth of feudal out of tribal, correct? The Heian?
That's really
well, family. Well, family communal.
Yeah.
Like, you know the part of it's when you actually converted to like the actual concept of full daimyo like control and all that shit.
Yeah, well, let's just put it this way: there was a lot of more people in control. It's just that it's like the likelihood of you dying for not listening goes up after that. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah,
the
cementing of the control becomes more absolute in this period.
Right, but I'm just saying that it kind of existed then too. It's just
Yeah, no, I was just pointing out. I'm trying because it is a particular transitory period. Of course, it's going to have factors of both time period before and after, because it is that transition. I was just more pointing out, yeah, it's still technically feudal though. And that's why I included in one of the 7.
yeah.
I know you want to smack me because this is Western understanding versus Asian understanding of the Japanese culture, but
Yeah, like I don't want to say that you're generalizing, but the thing is that like
I'm
for
westernizing is more accurate.
yeah, yeah, like what I would say is like, yeah, like Japan has been feudal the entire time, is what I would say. It's just that when you see like extreme brutality with feudalism, that's when that change happens.
Mm. Okay, fair enough. Mm.
It's still feudal. Like there's still like the whole feudal system. It's just that it's a lot more brutal, which makes it feel like it's more feudal. But there's still like a whole like
Fair enough. Yeah, I'll have to dig further because the way I had understood it is, well, the brutality increased. It was also like certain formality, ritualism, like family respect transposing outside of the family, like all of this transition during this time period to becoming more solidified and cemented. It was only regionally important before then, and then it spread to the rest of the country. Well, rest of the islands, I should say, because these are multiple countries at this point.
yeah. Yeah,
And like I said, I'm westernizing it because we're dealing with a Western audience who really only understands the transition from tribal to feudal, not Asian 15 bajillion different steps between the 6 different ones that we know. Like, like they don't understand that. And honestly, I barely understand it enough to know how much they don't understand it.
right.
I mean, it's just, it is. Like, yeah, for those of you who end up watching this video, Asian history does not work like Western history. Like, the homogeneity that you end up seeing happen at different time periods in Europe almost never fucking happens in Asia. Like, it's just like, the transitions are less transitions and more unique evolutionary forms that we Westerners have yet to understand because our culture is too young. Like, that's just the honest truth. As condescending as it is, Western culture isn't old enough to really understand like why things in Asia work the way they work. We lost those ancient cultures to disasters and fucking volcanoes and shit like that like wiped out all the records and all that crap. Asia kept going and never stopped. We have certain calendars in Asia Major that date back to 6,000 BCE. A continuous calendar that they have kept every day that entire time. Asia's weird. Trying to understand Asia is very complicated. You are talking about one of the primary birth locations of human civilization. And before somebody smacks me and say, oh no, that was Africa. That was the human species. Civilization happened in the Fertile Crescent. That's in Asia. Come at me, bro. I'll fuck you up. That being said, this is actually where we start seeing the diversification and reintegration of multiple human species. This is when Homo sapiens are interacting with Denisovans, Neanderthal, and Erectus all at the same time. Like, so this isn't human culture as we understand it as Homo sapien culture. They are literally interacting with different species of humans. Like this is a very, very complex thing that we have to get into, like the way civilization works in Asia. The oldest ones that we know of, because this is the key word, that we know of, because this is a fairly recent discovery. Before then, we thought it was much earlier or much later than this, is 24,000 BCE. That's the earliest that we know of. There are probably earlier ones that existed. And that is that's on an island in the Pacific, in like the oceanic region.
We have to be very careful here because we're starting to define what we consider to be civilization, right? It's
a non-migratory people with fixed locations, a static civilization.
Yeah, but like you could easily have people who would have a fixed location for a few generations, and then maybe a group breaks off to become migratory and finds a new spot to have a fixed location. The point that I'm making is it's a bit of a Loki's wager situation. It's hard to pin down exactly when and where civilization.
Well, no, we have certain markers for what is the beginning of civilization, meaning an amalgam of groups of families into a singular isolated location, not for one or two generations, but for many generations, establishment of permanent structures, regardless of what they're built out of and whether they lasted the test of time is immaterial. They were attempts at permanent structures as opposed to transitory structures like the Native Americans did with their wigwams and whatnot. So on and so forth. Like we could see there are certain markers for this, and the earliest one that we know of is 24,000 BCE. We know nothing about them. We don't know their language. We don't know their name. We know nothing about them except for that they cut big ass columns of basalt rock and use them like Lincoln logs to form walls. That's it. That's all we know about them.
Fair. I'm thinking, like, my mind goes to, I think it was the Pueblo who cut giant cavities out of the sides of
sandstone rock in Southwest America.
Yeah, basically dug caves out of mountains. I know it's not exactly a mountain, but the point is.
No, you're accurate. It is a mountain, and they are digging out of the side of it's. They're not digging caves. They are creating the pueblos. Their name is also the name of the structure, and what they were doing was a combination of digging sandstone to create cavities, much like the Egyptians had in Africa. Many cultures and generations separated. But then what they did was a form of mud stucco on the outside of the stone as a form of plaster that then was painted to mimic shadows and things like this to camouflage their buildings and artistically frame their buildings within these outcroppings. But this is not even like the earliest we know of that do that. You can look at Darren Kuyu. This is another Asian culture location within. This one's within Turkey. This is a cave system, literal cave system, that was dug out of the volcanic rock underneath of a plain that is so massive, 50,000 people plus livestock could live underground. And it predates European culture as we know it today.
Anyways, the reason I was bringing up kind of the question of civilization was because, like, 24,000 years ago, granted, I never actually heard of this before, so
Bakulu Tarla.
Okay. But like as far as I know, the anthropology of of the people indigenous to the Americas goes back at least 50,000 years, and the question of how they got here is still not entirely
Whether it
known.
was a land bridge, whether it was boat,
Yeah,
there's a lot of
the
ways that
the land
that
bridge hypothesis, to my understanding, has largely been discredited.
well, they can say it's been discredited because they still think of it as a land bridge. They forget that we have gone through multiple ice ages,
Yeah,
and at multiple times that land bridge was 17 feet thick ice fucking caps along that
yes,
waterway that you could have fucking driven tanks across and not broken.
true. But then you have the question of a group of people, or a group of
We have
nomads
evidence
who were.
we have evidence of them doing it across the Atlantic side. Why would they not do it across the shorter Pacific side? Like they basically travel along the edge of the ice flow in little boats, and they use the ice as a coastline and just come right across.
Okay,
We have evidence of the
it was.
Norris and Laplanders doing this into North America, dating back to, I think it was 800 AD, and we have it in Alaska and the Yukon portions of Canada, going back to like 18,000 years minimum. So we're
Okay,
talking, I mean, at least that long ago, they when those ice ages were around and the caps were far enough down where they just little boats. They didn't need ocean going vessels. They needed
yeah.
coastal vessels.
My thing was more about the question of food and shelter, and like if it is in this extremely frozen north where there would have been little to no vegetation, there likely would not have been much in the way of livestock. Granted, yes, there would have been fish, and perhaps they subsisted largely or entirely off of sea life. But then there's still the question of shelter and whether or not you could successfully traverse that distance
I will
over a
point
number of
you to
generations.
I well, it's not even that far. Like here's the thing, Incom. You the distance is closer now than it used to be because of the movement of continents, but it's still not that far when you're talking up by the Bering Land Bridge, or what would have been Ice Bridge technically. Um, this period, like you and I, as out of shape and fucked up as we are, with Inuit gear, we wouldn't need like modern polar fleeces or any of that crazy shit. With Inuit gear,
Yeah.
could walk it in a year.
Hmm.
Walk it in a year.
Yeah.
These guys had boats. They could have done it in weeks. This is not a
Fair enough.
long. This is not a generational trip across the ice.
Okay.
I mean, let me rephrase it. It was a generational trip across the ice, but that's because the land was also ice at that time. But
Yeah.
ice over open water, I should say. And we're learning this, like as anthropology digs around the world are happening. We now have evidence of Chinese pottery on the west coast of South America, circa 200 BCE. Ancom.
Oh,
The world is getting much different, and these civilizations that we considered so inferior, so primitive, so savage, accomplished much greater things than we ever gave them credit for.
fair. Like I wasn't
Mhm.
meaning to
Oh, I know you weren't.
imply.
I'm just pointing out
Okay.
shit that has come along in the last 15, 20
Yeah.
years that a lot of people don't know about. Like the pottery shit, that's the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Like we have Arabic pottery on the coast of Brazil from like 1000 AD. So like right after the birth of the Arabic empires as they started to form, we have trade that went all the way across Africa, then all the way across the Atlantic.
Yeah. Oh, it-
Shorter distance at
my
that time.
shorter distance, yes, but I'm wondering, like, it seems more likely to me, based on the population distribution, that it would have come across the Pacific. While yes, it was a longer distance, it there were you know there were speckled
You
islands
could
all
be right.
across
Well, no,
there.
you could be right. But if you're right, we would then have to find evidence of that pottery between the east and west coast to prove that. Because that would mean that it would have landed in Chile, Peru, that kind of area, and then
Yeah,
traveled through the Amazon to end up on the Brazilian coast.
true.
So, like possible, not even improbable, but we'd have to find evidence that we don't currently have. Hell, we're lucky to have found the evidence we do have, because jungles
Yeah,
don't like to preserve archaeological evidence all that well.
yeah, yeah. I think the main argument I'm thinking of, and maybe I'm wrong about Atlantic Ocean geography, but there are far fewer islands in the Atlantic than the Pacific, and
Ve-
so the
almost,
island
almost
hopping.
none. It's not
Yeah,
island hopping. It would have been the same way that animals did it. It would have been you go and you'd never come back.
mm,
It was a one-way trip, because you're relying on the trade winds at that latitude, and you don't know that there's a land further north that you can go to and ride trade winds back. You don't even know if you're going somewhere. You're
yeah,
going out, like that's the thing, that whoever did this was a one-way trip.
fair enough.
Like even the Norse travelers who were able to hug the Arctic coastline and be able to kind of do a coastal navigation and not an ocean navigation back, even most of those cultures never came back. Crossing big oceans is almost always in the ancient world a one-way trip. It
Yeah,
was very rarely fucking both ways.
yeah. Well, it seems to me, based on the spread of the Pacific Island nations, that
No, you may
there
be right.
tended to be a lot there tended to be a lot more of that. Yeah, it was probably still a lot of one-way stuff, but occasionally they would find a new island that they could settle on and perhaps establish trade from the last island they went from,
Mhm.
and then the next group goes out and finds another island, and a
And
lot of
then
these
those
groups probably never
cultures are
come back.
wiped out by hurricanes, and we never knew they existed, and we lost those, so we don't know the interconnected trade route that was. Yeah, that's it. All
Yeah.
this is that's what I mean. So, as we are discovering more and more, and we are getting rid of the Western exceptionalism that corrupted anthropology for the first 300 years of it, um, that these dirty savages couldn't have done this. Obviously, some fucking white man went there and did it for him. Dumb shit.
Yeah.
We're discovering no. Christopher Columbus, yeah, buddy, you were like fucking several hundred years late to the party of discovering America. The other people just didn't fucking blow their own horn about it.
Yeah.
And they didn't have big ass boats that they brought a bunch of shit back in. They went one way, and maybe their great grandkids tried the one way trip back.
Yes.
Because the thing is, like, and Despy can back me up on this, especially with Asian cultures. In this time period, when we're talking like 300, 400 BCE, um, the idea of traveling out into the great unknown with your wealth and establishing your own little kingdom, that was like built into the folklore.
Mm.
Well, yeah, but no one did it. That's because it was folklore.
Well, no one did it and came back. There was a lot of people who tried it. We have stories of people in Japan even
Yeah.
sailing boats out into the Pacific. Japan never knows what fucking happened to them, because it's the middle of fucking, the dark ages. Nobody has the ability to communicate. Did they survive?
Well,
I don't know. Maybe.
well, but here's the thing: when we're talking about like Japanese like what is it, like wood like sailboats, they're not designed to go out into deep water at
No, no,
all.
that's what I'm trying to
They're
explain.
designed to hug the. So like
Well,
somebody trying to traverse out into the ocean with one of those is like certain death.
yeah, but what I'm trying to point out is, depending on what time period we're talking about, depending on how south those ice flows were, the coast was not the coast, but there was a coast to hug along the ice and do some of this shit. And this was true in Antarctica as well, where the ice sometimes crept further north, and they had a coastline that they could hug and get across. This is why we're finding certain genetic markers from places like Rapa Nui, aka Easter Island, now in certain populations of the Argentinians, and we can date it back to skeletons from fucking mausoleums in Argentina from like 700 AD. So they traveled somewhere in between there, and this genetic marker made it into this skeleton.
Yeah.
That's only found on Rapa Nui because of the way their isolated population worked.
I get that. I'm just saying like the technology that the Japanese had for boats that were designed for anything but like fishing and whaling,
wasn't great.
They wouldn't have made the
Google Welsh. Yeah, Google Welsh round ship.
Okay.
Somebody made it across the Atlantic in one of those. We have an actual journal of it.
Good for them.
Yeah, I'm just saying. Was it pretty much certain death? Yeah, but that 1 in a billion, motherfucker. We now know why some jackass in fucking middle of nowhere fucking New Mexico 1,000 years ago had blue motherfucking eyes and blonde hair and wasn't an albino. Because there was some Welsh dickhead who made it over here because he was exiled across the ocean and they wanted him to fucking die. He just happened to make it over here, and now we find his genetics in certain Native American tribes.
Right.
But how could we have ever known that back then? It would have been a legend. The white Indian? The white Indian that came across the water and taught them blank or blah, blah. That would have been a fucking legend. Nobody would have fucking believed that until we had the genetics to back it up.
Yeah. like to me, it's it seems like a 1 in a billion when talking about Japan. I'm not gonna lie.
I'm not arguing. All I can say is that we do know, not Japanese, but Chinese, pottery ended up in Peru. China's further away, so technically, you guys could have made it.
Well,
technically.
No,
it's like, we're talking technically here. And it is that 1 in a billion motherfucker that made it, but...
Right, I'm just saying, like there were 10 that went before him. They were all definitely dead.
There was probably 1,500 that went before him that all fucking died before they ever got fucking out of sight of fucking Japan's coastline. At these odds, let's be honest. There's some of them that didn't make it out of the fucking dock before they died.
Yeah.
They died of just the sheer fright of getting on the boat. Oh shit, what am I about to do?
Yeah.
Like, but it happened. And we know it happened now because of genetics on skeletons. How the fuck did that skeleton with that genetic marker get there? Did somebody fucking plant it 1,000 years ago? What? Unless we got aliens going around playing fucking silly buggers, we're fucking... we got some trade route that happened there. Somewhere.
I don't think that's how all this shit happened.
Well, depending on what white supremacists you're talking about, yeah, the Ariani definitely led everybody around the world. But that being said, I'm more just kind of pointing out that it's like, unless you are going to put out some Occam's razor, improbable fucking, concept, the logical concept is at one point, probably a very short point, there was a trade route. Some guy from Brazil or one of the South Pacific islands or somewhere, between there, here and there, made it to China. And then China was like, oh, there's people over there. Let's try and send traders. And 1 or 2 jackasses made it with some pots. Or they all fucking died in the middle of the ocean and the boat made it there and the pots survived. Who fucking knows? But the pots made it there.
Yeah.
And then we have the genetic marker for the Native, American North Americans with the Welsh marker. Hundreds of years before anybody thought that any European found North America. Like, the skeleton is hundreds of years older. Yet we have this Welsh marker. Huh?
Yeah.
I mean, convergent evolution could potentially argue that it happened. I have trouble with that, though. The idea that that the human race convergently evolved not only the same trait, the same exact genetic marker for it, exact, down to the same codon placement. Like, that probability, like, income, like, that even trying to do the numbers making my head hurt. What would you put that at?
I mean,
It'd be 10 higher than 10 to the 30th.
I wouldn't even want to venture a guess, just because the sheer, like, there are what, 10 to the 10 base pairs in human DNA alone, and then you have then you have to consider the fact that
You can get
just
blue eyes
in-
from 50 different variations and multiple
Yeah.
codon locations. Yeah.
Yeah, the number of coding genes that it could be. Then you have all of the non-coding genes, all the signaling proteins, all of the
Yeah, the number is going to be
all the
insane.
like all the Evo Devo shit that could come out of this is I can't.
Is
do
it
that.
possible? Yes. Is it probable? No. What's more probable is some jackass from Wales got on a boat and made it over here.
Yeah.
That's the reality of it. The old expression that my wife likes to say to the new nurses: when you hear hoofbeats, look for horses, not zebras.
Yeah, that's an old saying. I remember hearing that in Scrubs.
Well, it's an old saying for a reason. It's
Yeah.
the logical interpretation of Occam's razor.
Yep. Although I do wonder if, sadly, sometimes that particular interpretation does allow the more rare diseases
does.
to slip through.
It does. But here is the reality of that. In proper medical systems, that is not as big of an issue because they have things like diagnosticians and like disease specialists, things like that. That being said, yes, this will happen. Yes, this will result in certain percentage of deaths. What's the converse? If you look for the fucking zebra all the time, now all those people that have easily preventable illnesses die.
Yeah. It's the lesser of two evils in this case.
Well,
Just
not
like
even
that.
just that. It's the greater good. This isn't even the lesser of two evils. This is, you are doing the logical thing for the most amount of people, because that is what is beneficial to the survival of your species. Trying to finite out the hyper rare, the cryptozoic virus that came off of a fucking asteroid. What the fuck are you talking about? That's maybe happened once in our entire species time period. Could it be? Yeah. How much time are you gonna waste, and how quick is that patient gonna die? Treat the fucking patient. Don't treat your ego.
Yeah.
Unless you are the patient and your ego is the problem.
Which, let's be real here, sick doctors, that happens a lot.
Yeah. But I mean, this is just my point. It's the same concept. If I find Chinese pottery in Peru circa 900 AD, 500 years before Columbus supposedly made his ass to fucking America, and 100 years before the Norse made their asses to fucking America, North America no less, let alone fucking, all the way down there, I'm gonna assume there was some kind of trade route that China got their goods to South America at least once. Probably more than once, but at least once. Because I have no other logical explanation for it being there outside of fucking aliens, and aliens isn't logical.
Nope. And certainly isn't the simpler explanation.
Well, it's technically simpler, but it adds more assumptions, therefore makes it... Yeah.
When I say simpler, I meant, fewer assumptions.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I know, but people outside of our nerd world don't understand that, because simple to them is God did it.
Yeah, fair enough. Just so you mean he didn't? The more accurate modern statement of Occam's razor is when you have two hypotheses with roughly equal amounts of evidence, the hypothesis which requires the fewest assumptions should be assumed as true.
And is most likely to be true, is the finishing of that statement. But yes.
It is most likely to be true, yes.
Oh, that being said, do we occasionally get fucking zebras and unicorns? Yeah. But
just because it's most likely to be true doesn't mean it always is. It's just most likely.
But this is getting outside Dante, because Dante and Occam would have argued like fucking cats and dogs, if we're being honest.
Fair.
But getting into this, like this does kind of get into the concept that we're dealing with. The way we have to look at even Dante, least amount of assumptions. So my assumption is he has the knowledge of his time period of the things he's talking about, not outside extra period knowledge or extra regional knowledge to what he's writing about. If I assume anything more, I have to make a bunch of assumptions of how did he get this knowledge, etc.
Mm-hmm.
I can make a whole bunch of assumptions of the knowledge he has because of where he lived. He lived very close to one of the greatest libraries of the time. Still to this day, it's a great fucking repository of knowledge. And he was highly educated by some of the best tutors, and we know their tutors by name and where they studied. This gives me a certain level of assumption that is very minimal to assume his level of knowledge. If I start assuming he knew more Greek history and Greek mythology than he did, now we get into the assumption that no, he meant Plutus, not Pluto, or Pluto and not Plutus, when in reality other authors in the same time period were making similar mistakes because they were working on imperfect knowledge, because the dissolvent of the Eastern Empire had not fallen, and the repository of the Eastern Roman Empire had not come back to Europe. Like, do I have records of Dante going to Istanbul? I don't. Anybody else? Unless I got something like that, I gotta assume he had what was available in Italy up till that point.
Yeah.
And this is what you should do too, students who are watching this. Do not assume more than the author is capable of. If the author is from 1300s Italy and has only traveled around the Mediterranean in a very small capacity around the Mediterranean at that, you can assume he is only going to have a certain amount of outside knowledge from trade routes that directly intersect with where he has been.
And because Istanbul is also on the Mediterranean, so the question is...
But he didn't even travel all the way to Greece. Like, he traveled the coasts of Italy, some France. Like, he very little. That's why I said limited as he was. Yeah. But even then, let's say he traveled the entirety of it. He didn't stay in Istanbul long enough for there to be a record of it, so he didn't stay long enough to study.
And if you throw yet another They Might Be Giants tune into my head. God damn it.
Hey, they're good with their history. What can I say?
True.
Now, anything anybody would like to add before I close this out?
No, I think I'm good.
All right, and with that, we close out the lovely Canto 12, and sorry for the technical issues, because fucking OBS decided that it wanted to put it up as unlisted because it glitched. So, I will see you next week.